For centuries, humans were tolerated, fringe creatures on a backwater death world, known more for their stubborn biology than their intellect. In galactic courts, they were the joke. In science symposiums, the punchline. Their theories were labeled chaotic optimism. Their experiments, cosmic accidents. But while the galaxy laughed, humans kept building. Not for approval, not for conquest, for necessity. So when the war came, and the galaxy's brightest minds failed, it wasn't the weapons that saved us. It was what we broke. The laws of physics. The Galactic Scientific Tribunal stood as the pinnacle of interstellar intellect. 50 species, 5,000 disciplines, and one assumption. Earth was always behind. They called humans the theorists of mud, charmingly primitive, always inventing what couldn't exist. At the 212th Pan-Celestial Symposium, humans arrived late. Their delegation was small, 5 men and women, lean-faced and polite. They brought no weapons, no demonstrations, just data. Old data, according to the Virexian chairman. Irrelevant data, said the Soloth delegates. We've mapped time, boasted a Koran cosmologist. What could apes possibly add? The humans introduced chronoresonant collapse, a theory built not on weaponry or propulsion, but on temporal resonance. Their proposal, time is not linear, but vibrational. Cause and effect are merely points of temporary agreement. Destabilize that resonance and reality folds. It's like knocking over a stack of cards in the future, the lead human, Dr. Selena Barris, explained, and watching the past blow away. Laughter erupted. A Zalari physicist wiped tears from her eyes. Do they not know time symmetry was disproven 4 centuries ago? Dr. Abaris didn't blink. Disproven with incomplete parameters. And what do you plan to do with this collapse? Sneered the Jorith ambassador. Travel backward and undo your planetary climate guilt? No, Abaris replied. We plan to survive what's coming. That silenced the room, briefly. Then came roars of laughter louder than before. Humans always think something's coming, said a Threx engineer. Apocalypses are a cultural addiction. The tribunal voted. Result, theory dismissed as pseudoscientific fatalism. Earth's delegation was barred from presenting for 5 cycles. Solon Abaris stood slowly, bowed once, and collected his datapad. No resistance, no protest. Only a soft phrase caught by a nearby recording drone. We brought a warning, not belief. That night, the human ship departed. No farewell messages, no follow-ups. Just quiet orbit, then gone. Tribunal members moved on quickly. There were exosolar anomalies to investigate, FTL trade to debate, and an upcoming symposium on cross-dimensional ethics. Earth was irrelevant again, but the archives remember. Earth withdrew. Not just from the tribunal, but from every interstellar research alliance. No more shared papers. No collaborative experiments. No guest lectures. Just silence. For a while, this was considered a relief. Let the apes chase ghosts in their jungles of entropy. Let them build castles in quantum sand. The galaxy didn't need mythmakers. But over time, whispers began. First, a station near the Murafold reported temporal static, exactly the sort described in Earth's theory. Dismissed as equipment failure. Then a freighter arrived 2 hours before it launched. Entire crew disoriented, holding conversations that hadn't happened yet. Explained away as a clerical hypersync issue. But then came the parallax tear on Zorith Prime. A whole research colony blinked out. Not exploded, not destroyed, just erased, as if they had never been born. One fragment of their data feed survived, and in it a single word appeared again and again, scrambled, echoed, refracted through subquantum code. Resonance. The tribunal reconvened in panic. Conferences were extended. Theories resurrected. Earth was not invited, but they tried to reach out. Diplomatic feelers, scientific envoys. No response, not even rejection. Only Earth's signal relays repeating one strange line over and over. No submission, no sabotage. We warned you. The Zalari called it petty. The Jorith called it performative. The humans called it preparation. Because while the galaxy mocked, Earth built. Not fleets, not weapons, but something else. Something no one could name yet. And still the galaxy laughed. Because laughter was easy. Safer than admitting the possibility of error. Safer than believing the mud-world thinkers might have glimpsed something the great minds had not. The tribunal continued its work. They published 3 new theories on time coherency limits. None worked. They ran 17 temporal simulations. None completed. They tried to contact Earth again. Nothing. It was as if the humans had placed the entire planet on a do not disturb frequency. And behind closed doors, whispers grew among junior researchers. Why does their model work when ours doesn't? Why did the Murafold destabilize right after they predicted it? Why do I keep dreaming of cities I've never lived in? In the cold silence of their exclusion, Earth was changing, not visibly, but resonantly. As the stars spun on, the tribunal returned to work, and Earth, forgotten Earth, began counting backward. The Xerian conclave did not issue a declaration of war in the traditional sense. There was no broadcast, no ultimatum, no ceremonial prelude. They simply erased Arcadia Station. 7 million people, gone in a flash of colorless light that inverted the shadows across a quadrant of space. It was day 1. Earth Command thought it was a weapons malfunction, a tragic incident, perhaps collateral from internal Xerian experiments. On day 2, 3 more colonies fell. Time itself fractured near the blast zones. Survivors described hearing their own deaths before the strikes hit. Some screamed in languages not yet invented. On day 3, Xerian ships appeared over Mars. The orbital defense grid, one of Earth's proudest constructs, lasted 47 seconds. What the Xerians deployed wasn't conventional, not plasma, not antimatter. It was dimensional shear, a weapon that didn't just destroy matter, but removed it from narrative continuity. The Martian cities weren't bombed. They were edited, deleted. On day 4, Earth's military high command issued mobilization orders. Task Force Pyrrhus launched to intercept the Conclave's spearhead flotilla near Europa. They never arrived. Satellites captured one final image, a human battleship stretched like string across the stars, its metal ribs warped into musical tones. On day 5, Earth's outer colonies reported time stutter. Emergency broadcasts looped endlessly. One distress signal repeated the same words 91,003 times. We are alive. We were alive. We are. By day 6, it was clear. Humanity wasn't fighting a war. They were being unraveled. The Xerians did not negotiate. They did not pause. They advanced like physics given intention. Day 7, Earth's lunar colonies fell, not in flames but in silence. Luna Echo, the base once considered too deep to breach, went dark mid-sentence. The last transmission? They're not killing us. They're unmaking us. The Conclave's weapons were fourth-dimensional. They attacked continuity, memory, outcome. Ships returned with different crews. Maps no longer matched. One general admitted, "We have no enemy formation to counter. We are watching a storm rewrite what we were." By day 8, human resistance dropped to 12% capacity. Entire fleets disappeared between coordinates. Strategic AIs suffered recursive logic failures, unable to predict events even seconds ahead. Civilian panic turned into mass resignation. The Xerians hadn't just broken Earth's fleets, they'd broken Earth's assumptions. On day 9, the United Terran Assembly convened an emergency session. 3 hours in, the president stood. "We no longer understand what we're fighting," she said, "so we're giving control to those who tried to understand before we had to." That day, Protocol Ophiuchus was invoked. The words hadn't been spoken in centuries, not since the Academy of Contempt. Most citizens didn't even know what it meant, but deep below the Antarctic ice shelf, a vault opened. Inside, 22 scientists, the Chrono-Resonant Directorate. They had not attended meetings, had not drafted speeches, had not spoken in galactic forums since the symposiums that ridiculed them. They had simply prepared. The president handed them sovereign command. Do what must be done. Day 10, Xerian fleets reached Earth orbit. They paused for the first time. Some say it was a gesture, others a moment to savor triumph. But above the Himalayas, something appeared. Not a fleet, not a weapon, a sphere, 2 kilometers wide, glowing with shifting resonance. It pulsed once, and everything stopped. Xerian ships froze in midair. Clouds halted. Tides stilled. 1 second later, all resumed. Except the Conclave's fleet was gone. Not destroyed, not in ruins. Gone. Sensors couldn't find wreckage. No energy residue, no mass displacement. It was as if the invasion fleet had been scheduled out of existence. Day 11. The Directorate issued one sentence to planetary broadcast. We have synchronized the anchor. No further explanation. Xerian command demanded answers. None came. They dispatched a second fleet. It too vanished at Earth's edge. No weapon fired. Only a sound, a low hum that felt like remembering a song never written. Day 12. Xerian science officers reported internal fracturing. Timelines misaligned. Officers remembered issuing orders that never happened. Some aged backward, others forward. One conclave cruiser found itself orbiting its own wreckage. From the inside, Earth responded with no fleets, no speeches, just silence. Xerian populations began collapsing, socially, cognitively. On day 13, the conclave sued for ceasefire. Earth never replied. There was no need, because on day 13, the war was already over. Not with conquest, not with death, but with narrative. What the Xerians didn't understand is that Earth had stopped trying to fight them in space. They fought them in meaning, in continuity, in resonance. The humans did not resist the war. They unwrote it. Beneath the Pacific Ocean, where tectonic silence meets the crush of darkness, humanity housed its last unsanctioned miracle. It had no public name, no official budget, no diplomatic acknowledgement, only a code name, Project Fallglass. The lab was hidden 38 kilometers below sea level, carved into volcanic basalt beneath a plate rift, intentionally built in a geological blind spot. Only 22 people were cleared to know it existed. Only one truly understood it. Dr. Ciara Yen hadn't spoken at a galactic conference in 17 years. Her last paper had been laughed out of existence by the Tribunal of Quantum Ethics. She had spoken of localized constant rewrites, of the possibility that reality, like code, could be commented out, line by line. Her theory was mocked, then buried. But in the silence of exile, she kept writing and building. And now Earth's final defensive hand bore her fingerprints. A room the size of a football stadium hummed like a memory trying to remember itself. At its center, the Fallglass engine, a crystalline structure suspended in a vacuum lattice, flickering with unplaceable colors. Three things made Fallglass unique. 1, it didn't operate on force. 2, it didn't emit energy. 3, it didn't do anything until you asked it to stop something else from happening. It ran on impossibility, on violating prediction. It operated by introducing suggestions into reality's foundation, like misspelled words inside a sacred text. Dr. Yen adjusted her gloves and looked into the shimmer. All right, she said softly. Let's introduce doubt. Test 1. Refraction reversal. Objective. Curve light backwards in a controlled vacuum tube for 0.3 seconds. The switch clicked. The tube dimmed. A camera blinked once and captured nothing. But outside the glass, the observer's pupils dilated. They saw the flash before the light had been emitted. Time stuttered. Light obeyed a different order. Result, success. A ripple passed through the lab, the kind that didn't shake walls but bent conclusions. They paused for an hour before resuming, not out of fear, but out of reverence. Test 2. Gravity null stabilization. Dr. Yen selected a zone the size of a teacup and designated coordinates 4.5 meters above ground. A paperweight was placed in the air. We're not turning gravity off, she said. We're just convincing it this part doesn't matter. She keyed the instruction. The paperweight floated, then reversed. Not upward, but inward. It folded into itself, shrinking into a two-dimensional object, still visible but weightless. It hovered there like a sigh, frozen in time. The intern monitoring physics logs vomited quietly into his elbow. Dr. Yen just nodded. Good, she said. We're only slightly offending the universe now. Test 3. Local space inversion. A Xerian cruiser, Captured during the early days of the war, was held in low orbit, suspended for research. Fall glass interfaced with long-distance targeting modules. The instruction was simple. Fold space inside itself. Coordinates locked. Command. Executed. There was no flash, no beam, no sound. The cruiser was there. And then it wasn't. Not vanished, not exploded. It was deleted from probability, from causal maps, from memory logs. The station it orbited no longer had records of ever encountering it. But inside Fall glass, one flicker pulsed red. The machine remembered what had been. Dr. Yen stepped back from the console. "This isn't a weapon," said Lieutenant Commander Harrow, watching the feed disintegrate. "This is a revision," Dr. Yen finished. Harrow swallowed. "You realize what we've made?" She nodded. "We've made choice the enemy's weakness. For centuries, physics had been a law book. Now it was a suggestion box, and Earth had finally opened it. They fed Fall glass-controlled paradoxes, event seeds where entropy reversed for milliseconds. They erased causal anomalies in one room while letting time stutter in another. They turned probability into a toolkit. But Dr. Yen refused to scale it beyond the lab. Not yet. "This isn't just about defeating the Xerians," she told her exhausted staff. "It's about demonstrating that survival is narrative privilege. We don't win by breaking their fleets. We win by rewriting their assumption of inevitability." She wrote it on the wall above the console. "Certainty is a flaw. Use it against them." Word spread, quietly. Fall glass didn't leak to the public, but to the scientific directorate in the Earth Command, it became myth. A myth no one wanted to believe, because if it was real, then nothing about reality was safe anymore. Xerian intelligence intercepted fragments of the tests. They didn't understand the data. They labeled the project anomaly engine. Their response? To double down on certainty, they increased pressure, sent timeline disruptor bombs into low orbit, but they never reached target. Fall glass began folding threats out of sync. One missile arrived 2 days before it was launched. It impacted nothing, buried itself in the sea, confused and obsolete. Another failed to arrive at all. Records of it were tagged. Temporal conflict, unrealized. Earth was not fighting harder. It was making harder irrelevant. Fall glass reached phase 4. Narrative pressure injection. This wasn't deletion. It was suggestion. Xerian diplomats began forgetting their own ultimatums. Fleet captains gave orders they didn't remember issuing. One conclave admiral defected, claiming, "I saw a war that already ended. I just hadn't caught up." Back on Earth, Dr. Yen stood beneath the machine she had nurtured for decades. Fall glass pulsed in silence. Not bright, not dark, just certain. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She only whispered, "We warned them," but they wouldn't read between the constants. Earth didn't break the enemy. It broke the board. And now the pieces moved only when allowed. By Fall glass. By the one human mind who dared to ask, what if the rules we live by are just the last suggestion someone made? The war did not escalate. It unraveled. Across the edge systems, ships blinked into existence after their battle reports were filed. Time bled backward. Outcomes predated intentions. And Earth vessels, sleek, silent, black as collapsed starlight, moved with choreography only probability could appreciate. Each ship carried a single innovation, a fall glass core, not a bomb, not an engine, not even a weapon, a concept made real. Encased in dampened vacuum lattices, each core pulsed with quantum indifference, rewriting its environment not by force, but by exclusion. Where they moved, rules failed, and where rules failed, opposition crumbled. Xerian warships deployed to intercept at the Pyrocross corridor, their finest flotilla aligning along predicted Terran routes. They waited, monitored, prepared. Earth's fleet never arrived. And yet, 3 hours later, they were gone. No wreckage, no signatures, just navigation logs corrupted by recursive data. One captain's final transmission looped endlessly. "We never saw them, but I think we already lost last week." The Tribunal of Combat Ethics, still scrambling to understand what fall glass was, released an emergency doctrine. Temporal aberration is not surrender. Earth made no announcements, no declarations. They simply moved, and the universe moved with them, unwillingly. In the Battle of Vega Echo, 27 Terran vessels emerged from a distortion bubble moments after Xerian ships recorded their destruction. Gunfire was irrelevant. No missiles were fired. The logs showed the human ships already holding salvage rights to floating Xerian debris before battle alarms had triggered. Sensors reported paradox error. Combat object exists without cause. Xerian crew members suffered mental collapse. Some aged rapidly. Others wept for lives they had not yet lived. One officer wrote in her final log, "The war didn't start. It arrived prepackaged." At the Battle of Vire Field, Terran ships deployed beacon buoys that sang in harmonic probability waves. The battlefield folded in upon itself. Enemy formations scattered, literally, some caught between moments, others inside their own engine rooms, turned backward, watching fuel unburn. A Xerian dreadnought disappeared completely. 3 weeks later, it was found in deep orbit around an unrelated moon. Crew intact, unaware they had even launched. Medical scans showed stable vitals but inverted entropy profiles, their blood cooling before their hearts beat. Doctors retired after reading the scans. In every encounter, the pattern repeated. No attacks, no defenses, just decisions denied. Xerian admirals stopped calling them Terran ships. They called them echoes, because by the time they were visible, they were already victorious. And when they weren't, they simply rewrote that part. One attempt to jam their signal networks resulted in a 200,000-kilometer no communication zone. Not from jamming, but from time refusal. The local space refused to acknowledge new information. Xerian navigators flew blind, into the past. Their ships reappeared in museums, empty. The Fallglass fleet learned to maneuver with narrative pressure instead of coordinates. They didn't need to destroy weapons. They only needed to ensure weapons were never imagined. On the desert moon of Rethdal, a transmission station reported an approaching Terran carrier. Its signature showed up before orbital telescopes confirmed visuals. Panicked, the outpost launched nuclear warheads. One warhead turned into smoke before detonation. Unfired, unmade, unreal. Another stopped midair, froze. A technician touched it. The warhead crumbled into sand. He screamed, "They're not killing us! They're correcting us!" That day, 17 colonies declared neutrality. Not from fear, from awe. Xerian military logic faltered. Simulations failed to run. Even AI command units fell silent. Because probability itself no longer obeyed instruction. To fight Earth was to enter a battlefield where memory, foresight, and possibility were opinions, and only one side had editing rights. Aboard Xerian flagship Klastun, High Marshal Reltek finally faced what their war had become. His fleet, 76 strong, engaged what was believed to be a rogue Terran scout cruiser. 4 seconds later, Reltek stood alone, not on the bridge, but in a circular white room with no doors, no stars, no clocks, just silence, and one sentence hanging in space. "You died bravely. Choose differently." He screamed until the silence remembered him, then woke back on the Klastun 3 days earlier, his crew alive, his ship intact, but a headache pulsing behind his eyes and tears on his cheek. He resigned the next hour. His resignation file timestamp, unknown. His last words, "They're not fighting us, they're editing us." In the observatory of Nalthon Kier, philosophers gathered to debate Fallglass warfare. One argued it wasn't war at all. "It is curatorial violence," she said. "They don't kill, they curate. They remove what doesn't serve the peace." Another responded, "That's madness. That's tyranny." The room fell silent when a child's voice, somehow connected to an intercepted Earth signal, responded, "No." It's a story where only the ending changed. The philosophers ended the session early. They left in silence. Across the galaxy, species no longer asked, "What is Earth doing?" They asked, "What reality are they choosing?" Fallglass became myth, then doctrine, then taboo. Black zones formed, sectors of space abandoned not because of destruction, but because probability refused to be coherent anymore. Ghost ships drifted through timelines that hadn't stabilized. Planets froze mid-revolt. Warlords vanished from memory. Diplomatic treaties arrived weeks before their first meeting. The war folded, not into fire, but into narrative, and humanity emerged not as conquerors but as authors. The Grand Tribunal of Galactic Sciences had not convened in person for over 3 centuries. But now the chamber pulsed with panic. Representatives from every major civilization, Xerion, Cathari, Zul Dominion, and even the aloof Myrenic Concord, gathered beneath the domed acoustosphere, whose purpose was to ensure clarity of thought and clarity of blame. The seats that once jeered at human theories now squirmed in discomfort. The Xerion envoy, scale-glittered and trembling, spoke first. "We need containment." The Cathari archivist responded sharply. "You can't contain that which unravels time." "Then we negotiate," hissed the Zul speaker, exhaling cold mist into the chamber's core. "Before they decide, the council is unnecessary." Silence followed. One delegate finally asked, "Are they coming?" As if summoned by discomfort itself, the Earth representative entered. Late, unescorted. He wore no ceremonial armor, no delegation cloak, just a modest black suit, a silver lapel pin shaped like a broken clock, and a calm smile that did not reach his eyes. "Apologies," he said casually. "Time got weird on the way here." No one laughed. He carried a small object, a writing pen, plastic, blue, insultingly mundane. He placed it on the central dais, activated the hollow field, and let the pen float. It hovered, then tilted sideways, hung there, defying physics. The chamber watched in frozen curiosity. Then, without warning, the pen began to fall, but not down. It fell sideways, as if gravity had recalibrated its meaning. It hit no surface. Before anyone could react, the pen froze mid-fall, then looped, again, again, again. A second passed, then 5. Then it unlooped, dropped straight, landed with a sound far louder than it should have made. The Earth ambassador looked around, then said simply, "We no longer believe in your limits." He bowed, no threats, no demands. Just that. The council erupted, not with shouts but movement. Some stormed out, others whispered into neural implants. One Cathari monk closed his 3 eyes and began to hum a morning dirge, reserved only for civilizations facing extinction. The Xerion envoy tore their notes in half. The Myrenic delegate floated upward and vanished mid-space, teleporting home without protocol. One species collapsed all diplomatic links to Earth within the hour. Another broadcast their surrender to Earth preemptively, just in case. A vote was hastily proposed. Motion: ban Earthian science from all recognized scientific institutions, declare it a threat to ontological safety, and suspend all Terran patents. The motion passed. Barely. Many abstained, afraid to provoke further instability. The ban passed into galactic law. But it was too late. Because Earth no longer operated under the Council's framework, they had rewritten it, not by voting, by observing, by learning, by building, alone. And now their science didn't seek recognition. It enforced truth. Not because it needed to, because no one else knew what truth meant anymore. The ambassador retrieved the pen from the dais, turned once to face the chamber, and said with devastating calm, "You should have listened when we whispered." Then he left. No guard stopped him. No envoy dared follow. In the silence that followed, the Xerion envoy muttered, "They still believe in diplomacy." The Cathari archivist replied, "No, they believe in something worse." "What?" The Myrenic voice, now disembodied through open channels, answered, "They believe in themselves." And across the galaxy, every species began rewriting their science doctrine. Too late. Earth wasn't proving theories anymore. It was writing laws. And those who had mocked them now faced a future rewritten by authors they didn't understand. At first, they thought it was interference. Static bursts in quantum comms, sensor anomalies, a voice whispering coordinates no one had broadcast. Then came the duplicates. A cargo ship entering the Valles Drift appeared again 3 minutes later. Same registration, same manifest. Identical down to the coffee stain on the navigator's jacket. But the crew inside were different. One version reported a successful voyage to Ganymede. The other claimed Ganymede had been consumed by ice. Both were real. Both were wrong. On Earth, the fall glass scientists began noticing inconsistencies in their own memories. They would wake with calculations written on whiteboards they didn't recall solving, equations from timelines they had never lived. And yet, the answers worked. Dr. Yen, who had once whispered that light could bend backward, now walked the halls of the Pacific Lab silent, pale, afraid to sleep. She was seen staring at clocks, sometimes reversing them manually, as if trying to will time back into obedience. One night, she collapsed mid-lecture, eyes wide. She was explaining time elasticity, said one assistant. Then she stopped, said she remembered dying. Twice. Across the solar coalition, the phenomenon spread. Miners on Callisto reported ghost reflections. They would wave to themselves across mirrored corridors, and the reflections would wave first. A station in the Kuiper Fringe lost contact for 7 minutes. When reconnected, the crew insisted it had been 7 months. Their hair was longer. Their logs were full. They had seen Earth fall, but Earth hadn't. Yet. Reports flooded in. Philosophers on Venus began dreaming in languages no one spoke. Martian children wrote stories about wars that hadn't happened, yet their endings aligned with military simulations. A synthetic AI on Europa committed suicide after declaring, "I saw too many branches. I no longer know what is." One fall glass technician, after attempting to recalibrate a probability field, carved this into his own arm. "We've become gods without knowing the language." The phrase spread like wildfire, not as a warning, as a prayer. Meanwhile, Earth's military remained silent. Fall glass wasn't officially used anymore. Too dangerous, too unpredictable. But rumors said otherwise. A fleet patrolling the edge of the arid-near expanse vanished during a training exercise. When they returned, their ships were older, paint stripped, engines degraded. Their admiral had died, of age. He was 38 when he left. He returned at 71. He brought back a journal filled with sketches of cities Earth hadn't built yet, names of people not yet born. A line in red ink on the last page read, "We won, but not the way you wanted." Some called it cosmic cancer, others cosmic awakening. Fall glass had not broken the universe. It had reminded it. Reminded it of what? That time was never linear, that reality never agreed to rules. It only tolerated them. That entropy was an opinion, not a law. Dr. Yen, pale and gaunt, called a private meeting with the last surviving architects of fall glass. They met in a lab that now existed half in our space, half in probability. She whispered, "We opened the lock thinking it was a door, but it was a mirror." No one disagreed. On Earth, gravity storms began as whispers. A pen would hover for 0.4 seconds. A person's reflection would lag behind. Then more. People began dreaming alternate lives, universally the same theme. A choice they hadn't made, lived out in full detail. A woman in New Delhi remembered 47 years of a marriage she never had. A child in Nairobi painted a cityscape of a place that didn't exist, until a probe from Titan found the same skyline beneath an ice canyon. Alien species began to retreat. The Cathari sealed their research systems, banned all experiments involving space-time modulation. The Xerians burned their notes on localized folding. One of their war priests broadcast a single phrase in 1,000 languages. We looked into the Terran science and saw the abyss looking back. But Earth didn't retreat. It revised, labs restructured, ethics councils reformed. The Council of Time-Bearing Sciences was created, composed equally of physicists, historians, and poets. Because someone had to remember the soul, not just the science. Their first doctrine was engraved in the moon's iron vault. We did not break the universe. We reminded it it could bend. And yet bending came at a cost. Some humans stopped dreaming. Others dreamed too much. One man swore he saw stars bleed. Another claimed he visited a version of Earth where fall glass had never been built. It was peaceful, he said, but we were afraid. Afraid of what? Someone asked. Afraid we'd forget what we could become. The final sign arrived quietly. A child on Ceres, born after fall glass, built a sand diagram in a research nursery, a spiral, 8 arms, perfect symmetry. It matched an energy pattern no scientist had ever taught her, but one that showed up in every fall glass test since activation. When asked how she knew, the girl said, "The stars told me." Not destruction, not madness. Something older. Something Earth had reawakened by daring to ask, what if the universe is listening? And if it was, what had it heard? They called it a funeral, but there was no casket, no hymns, no mourning rites from any one world. Just a gathering, across frequencies, across dimensions, across time. Representatives from 412 starfaring civilizations tuned in. Not all attended physically. Some only sent thought echoes or symbolic echoes in gravitational tone. But they all understood the name of the event, the Funeral of Certainty. It took place in orbit over the ruins of Xerion Prime, a planet that no longer had shape, only concept. Once home to an empire, now a gravitational echo and a whisper in the probability stream. A monument hovered silently above the debris field. Not made of metal or stone, but of coherent matterfold, a blend of quantum rock and historical memory. Across its surface, in every known script, it read, "Here lies certainty. Humanity survived without it." No one applauded. No one spoke. Not because they feared Earth, but because they were still learning how to speak after certainty. Fall Glass had ended the war, but not with a bang. No surrender was signed. No final fleet fell. Instead, consensus dissolved. Reality refused to stay in one lane, and the Xerians stopped existing in a measurable way. They had not been erased. They had been undecided. What did it mean to defeat an empire through disobedience to physics? It meant weapons could no longer be trusted. It meant math could lie if told gently enough. It meant faith, in data, in constants, in time itself, was now fragile. And Earth? Earth remained strangely silent. They issued no orders to the Council. They claimed no territory, no monuments to themselves, no demand for reverence, but they were everywhere now, in rewritten tech, in rewritten thought, in every lab that started a formula with assuming post-Earth constants. The Ventari archive worlds rewrote their codices. They added a new chapter to their book of unrepeatables, Terran Event Horizon. The Cathral war singers sang the war backwards, as a cautionary myth. The melody is illegal in 4 systems, too destabilizing. The Zevik-2 mathematicians burned 37 equations once considered universal, now corrupted by human variance. And still, the ripple continued. In a classroom under the second son of Lyria Fem, a child asked her instructor, "What does Earth build now?" The answer was long in coming. The teacher stared out the window at the shimmering sky, full light still distorted from what humans had done, and finally said, "They build things that don't end when you stop looking at them." On the council moon of Therosis, a new scientific doctrine was ratified, post-certainty methodology, science that worked even when constants refused to comply. Drafted in collaboration with 2 humans and 12 non-humans, it included emotional resonance as variable storytelling as measurable waveform, the possibility of conditional gravity. One elder delegate protested, "This isn't science, this is poetry." And a human replied, "We stopped seeing the difference when the sky bent." Across the galaxy, Earth scientists refused to explain. They didn't teach fall glass. They didn't export the machinery. They exported questions like, what happens when a particle remembers it was once a choice? What if the universe prefers listeners to observers? Can compassion alter causality? Species laughed at first, then cried, then built temples in zero gravity to contemplate answers. Xerion Prime remained the cautionary example. Once a world of architects, conquerors, reason. Now a broken chain of failed possibilities. Each rotation around its dead star unraveled another layer of what used to be. Pilgrims came, not to mourn, but to learn the feeling of before collapse. One poet wrote, "We do not bury the dead here. We bury the rules that killed them." Fall glass was declared forbidden tech by 5 intergalactic coalitions, but the ban was symbolic. Because by the time the vote passed, 46 species had already built their own versions. None worked. Because fall glass wasn't a machine. It was a gesture, a way of looking at the universe sideways. Earth did not stop building, but they built differently now. Gone were the battle cruisers, the dreadnoughts, the planetary shields. Instead, libraries that updated based on which version of the past you remembered. Gardens that only grew when spoken to kindly. Satellites that blinked Morse code lullabies into deep time. In orbit of Earth, a station pulsed with quiet data. No weapons, just a single plaque. We didn't win. We remembered louder. 100 years after the war on the moon of Caloren, a mother and child walked under a canopy of fracture light. The child pointed upward. Mom, do the humans still build weapons? The mother thought. She remembered the old wars, the before, the time when power meant noise. She smiled softly. No, love. They build reminders. The girl tilted her head. Reminders of what? Her mother pointed to the stars. Some flickered slightly, out of rhythm. Some bent in curves no telescope could map. Some didn't seem to be part of this timeline at all. She said, of what happens when we pretend the universe is quiet. One last memory. The final broadcast from Dr. Yen, archived in the Foldlight Vault. We were told science needed proof, but we remembered science was once just wonder we hadn't learned to defend. So we bent reality, not to conquer it, but to remind it we are listening, and sometimes so is it.